Zimbabweans due to ongoing unrest in that country?
There are no special permits that are being considered. You'll recall that Zimbabweans, when they come to South Africa, they are visa exempt, like many other countries in the SADC region. That's the one issue. But the second issue, where there's a situation that they are faced with, where there's a political instability, obviously there are certain rules that will apply in relation to either people are refugees or not. But in this instance, there's no special permit.
The ministry says for now, South Africa is monitoring the situation in the neighboring country, with officials also keeping a close eye on the Beitbridge border post.
Our officials are constantly monitoring the situation so that we can deal with it. But the major project is that one which is led by the government of engaging the Zimbabwean government to assist them to create stability.
There is engagement between the Beitbridge officials on our side as well as the Beitbridge officials on the Zimbabwean side to monitor the situation and give us feedback on a daily basis of what the situation is like.
The ministry officials would not be drawn to flesh out further details on this matter. Uche Jamela for CGTN in Pretoria, South Africa.
Now look at our corporate headlines today. East African Portland Cement has denied reports that it is in talks with Lafarge about a possible acquisition. The French multinational already holds about 41.7% stake of the cement company, and earlier reports had indicated that Lafarge now wants the remaining stake. The cement maker needs a cash injection of around $146 million to stay afloat. Meanwhile, Nigeria's stock exchange has lifted African Alliance Insurance's suspension to trade its shares. The underwriting firm was amongst 8 companies suspended following their failure to adhere to listing rules. Now, regulations required them to file their financial statements within a speculated time frame. And in South Africa, the Competition Tribunal has ruled that CompuTicket pays a $1.44 million administrative penalty for abuse of dominance between 2005 and 2011. The tribunal also found that between 2006 and 2009, there was evidence of threats made by the ticket seller's personnel to enforce its exclusivity. Now, CompuTicket denies the allegation and plans to appeal the tribunal's findings. And Nissan and Mitsubishi have said Carlos Ghosn received improper payments totaling about $8.9 million from a joint venture between the car makers. The claim follows a joint investigation by the companies into misconduct carried out by Ghosn. Now, the 64-year-old is accused of having understated his pay for 8 years and of having shifted private investment losses temporarily onto Nissan. And that's a look at our corporate headlines. Well, let's head into a short break now, still coming up on the show. Bosasa's former COO implicates a sitting South African minister during his testimony at the state capture inquiry. And Oxfam calls on governments to bridge the gap between the rich and the poor.
The world economy as we know it is about to change. Global business reports highlight emerging markets, developing countries, and dynamic sectors worldwide. We feature top analysts and newsmakers to provide perspectives on every facet of business. From an on-the-ground perspective, we provide you with balanced and objective assessments. Fast, sharp, and insightful. Global business, only on CGTN.
Every story starts out like this.
Okay. We'll head up now.
But beyond the rush of the numbers, there's always a more fundamental question. What happened? Who has been affected? When market-moving decisions are made, who's responsible? And why?
Let's get some reaction on ground. Joining us in Johannesburg is Sutra Naidoo. Hello, Naro.
This is how all stories begin. See how they end. Only on Global Business.
Well, welcome back. Now let's head back to Zimbabwe. Of course, the country just found out that South Africa rejected a request from Zimbabwe for an emergency loan of about $1.2 billion back in December. Of course, President Emmerson Mnangagwa, he skipped the World Economic Forum in Davos, returning back to Zimbabwe to deal with the ongoing chaos, of course, around the protests over the hike of the price of fuel. Well, Farai Makotoya now joins us in Harare with some more insight into the situation on ground. Farai, welcome to the show. Now, of course, we know South Africa may have declined to lend Zimbabwe that $1.2 billion, but Farai, it has agreed to use its influence with the IMF and the World Bank to broker a debt clearance plan for the country. So what does this mean for Zimbabwe right now as it faces FX as well as fuel shortages, rising inflation, violent protests, of course, over those fuel price hikes?
Well, Uche, this will strike another blow to Zimbabwe's effort to recover its economy. I think whoever you speak to, different experts we've certainly spoken to, acknowledge that while the country is getting FDI and is trying to attract foreign investors, those are long-term. Those projects will be long-term. But what many people concur here is that Zimbabwe needs some sort of immediate financial bailout, cash that it can inject immediately into the economy to shore up its balance of payments position, to be able to inject foreign currency into the economy. The crucial challenges, these problems that are being faced here, are as a result of a shortage of foreign currency. The country not generating enough foreign currency, its production is not up to full capacity because companies that need forex to import raw materials can't do that because of this shortage. And so Zimbabwe looking for an immediate sort of cash bailout, $1.5 billion to $4 billion, depending on who you speak to, that would be put into the economy to help it kickstart its economy very quickly. The failure to get this will be a huge dent. Hopefully, if South Africa can use its influence to sway some of these international financial institutions, it'll be a plus for Zimbabwe. But so far, Zimbabwe hasn't had any joy internationally and further afield, and that's largely because of its poor repayment record. So I'm not sure how much influence South Africa can use, but certainly that'll be a plus to Zimbabwe's bid and will help it, but it would have hoped for that financial bailout immediately.
Quite right, Farai. Of course, Zimbabwe certainly can't seem to access any fresh financing right now. Total debt in the country stands about $16.9 billion US dollars. Has the finance minister, Mthuli Ncube, given a clear arrears clearance plan just yet?
Well, we know that he's been speaking to some of these international financial institutions. He's attended the World Bank and IMF annual meetings. In the past, the former finance minister had come up with a debt clearance plan, often referred to as the Lima strategy. Now, that was largely premised on Zimbabwe being able to get some sort of white knighthood, inject or lend it this money that it would use to immediately clear some of its outstanding arrears to these institutions and then be able to unlock more funding. We're not sure if that is still on the cards, but we know that Professor Mthuli Ncube has expressed confidence that he has received a thumbs up to some of his plans to try and extinguish some of this debt. We know that he's introduced new revenue streams. The 2% tax, the very contentious 2% tax, for instance, has generated a lot of revenue, and we expect that some of that money is being used to put off and to pay off some of the domestic debt, and he's obviously looking at other ways in which he can generate foreign currency or get some money to pay off some of the international arrears. He has been talking to the IMF and the World Bank. They are working with Zimbabwe, and we understand that they have given the all clear to the plan that Professor Mthuli Ncube has come up with, and we hope that it will start to bear and yield fruits as we go forward.
Well, Farai, in the meantime, official figures put inflation in the country at around 42%. Prices of basic goods, fuel, they've more than doubled. Now, after last week's protest, how bad is the uncertainty in Zimbabwe right now?
Well, certainly you talk about inflation, and the minute you mention inflation to Zimbabweans, they relive some of the trauma that they went through back in 2008. Experts say that we are heading towards hyperinflation, perhaps, well, certainly not as bad as it was when we broke records in 2008, but certainly a cause for concern. And those prices are going up, and mainly fueled by these distortions in the exchange rates because of this bond note. It's on a parallel market and trading at as much as three and a half times more than for $1 you can get to 3.5 bond notes. And so that disparity is what's fueling these increases in prices. Zimbabweans are very uncertain about the future, largely because you're not sure what you're earning today, if it will be able to buy you the same amount of goods or the same groceries that you're able to buy today. You're not sure that when you get your next paycheck, if you'll be able to buy the same amount. Certainly that hasn't been the situation. What we bought 2-3 months ago with a 100 bond note is certainly not what you can buy today. And so there is that uncertainty. And Zimbabweans perhaps still looking for some sort of concrete plan. You mentioned it earlier. Has Professor Mthuli come up with a concrete plan, something tangible, something that's been articulated well enough to the people? And unfortunately, that hasn't been the case. We know that he's talking about reforms, but in very broad terms. And what Zimbabweans are looking for are very specific plans, short-term plans that they can, sort of see the results very quickly and be able to see that a change or a difference is coming. And so at this stage, I'd say a lot of Zimbabweans disillusioned, anxious, worried about the future, and looking for some sort of direction. And hopefully, when Professor Mthuli returns from the World Economic Forum, where he's now leading that delegation after President Mnangagwa came back home, hopefully he'll come back with something more tangible that he can present to the people of Zimbabwe and instill more hope.
Well, certainly a tough situation there. Many thanks, Farai, for that update. Farai Mwakutuya joining us there in Harare. Well, let's head to South Africa now, where former Bosasa executive Angelo Agrizi has detailed how the company allegedly footed the bill for ANC rallies in Gauteng at the insistence of Environmental Affairs Minister Nomvula Mokonyane. Now, Agrizi gave his testimony during the state capture inquiry. The former Bosasa executive told the Zondo Commission that the company catered for numerous ANC rallies in Gauteng and even paid for the ruling party's 107th birthday cake. Well, let's delve again into the Commission's findings with Angelo Coppola. He joins us in Johannesburg. Angelo, great to see you. Now, last week, we heard from the former Bosasa CEO in his testimony that several leading politicians in the country were amongst about 38 high-profile individuals who received payoffs from the firm. Now, a number of new names to come out, as you heard there, including Environmental Affairs Minister. Give us the highlights from today's testimony.
Well, as you said, Mokonyane's name was the first out of the starting gates this morning at about 12 o'clock when we started listening to his, that's Agrizi's testimony. Her relationship with Bosasa dates back to 2002. Agrizi says that he got involved in 2009 when he was allegedly counting out her $3,500 bribe, as it were, and physically handing it over to her. She also got other monthly and annual benefits and inducements like crates of high-end alcohol, whiskies, meat, and other gifts. It's understood she could also protect Bosasa from investigation and prosecution from the state Serious Investigation Unit and the NPA, the National Prosecuting Authority, and that's why those bribes were paid to her. Agrizi personally saw that money getting handed over to her on numerous occasions, he alleges. That was when she was initially the MEC in Gauteng for security and then as Minister of Water Affairs and Sanitation. And her house, of course, had all the security upgrades done thanks to Bosasa. Agrizi admits to being walking around her properties, the 2 properties in Johannesburg, to check that the jobs were done properly. There was also some testimony around Tom Moyane today. That's the disgraced SARS commissioner. Agrizi mentioned him when he was the Correctional Services Commissioner. The way Agrizi tells it, before Moyane started at Correctional Services, several high-ranking officials would share in a 35,000 monthly pot, a bribe pot. This was paid to them via an intermediary. When Moyane joined, that figure jumped by some 50% to around $53,000 US per month. Agrizi may well provide some more testimony related to Moyane at a later stage, but another name that did pop up today was that of MP Vincent Smith, who was head of the Portfolio Committee on Correctional Services, as well as 3 other members of Parliament who got monthly payments to stop any kind of negative press against Bosasa. So that's what we heard today. Pretty damning evidence, as it were, or testimony, should I say, Uche.
Well, as you mentioned, Angelo, Agrizi's affidavit to the Zondo Commission, it seems to have trickled down now into other inquiries going on into the country, such as the Mokogoro inquiry that implicated suspended directors from the Public Prosecution Office. Give us some insight into that situation.
Well, look, as I said, it was understood by Agrizi and everyone at Bosasa that Mokonyane had the ear of Mr. Zuma at the time and was able to protect Bosasa from any investigation or prosecution by those 2 entities. We heard earlier testimony last week of illegally obtained SIU and NPA documents related to Bosasa, and those Agrizi says he saw in the safes at the Bosasa offices. We understand that the Mokoro inquiry has requested an affidavit from Agrizi about Advocate Jibo, who's one of the National Deputy Directors under investigation. That's likely to be delayed until Agrizi has given his testimony on the subject. In the meantime, we understand that from Jibo's lawyer that she wants her moment in front of the Zondo Commission. So she wants to finish off on the one commission and then move over to Zondo to explain her version of events. Of course, day one at the Mokoro inquiry was really a scene setter, kind of establishing what the NPA does and what it's up to and how it's going to progress in terms of job descriptions for those 2 National Deputy Directors who are being investigated. Uche.
Well, as all this is going on, yet another inquiry into allegations of impropriety at the country's Public Investment Corporation in Pretoria begins today. Give us a sense of the allegations against the firm and certainly who we could see implicated there.
Well, look, the PIC is, as you know, the continent's biggest asset manager with assets of around $145 billion that they look after. The biggest client they have are the government pension fund. There's been talk for some time of investments by this asset manager that may not have been properly considered. There's also a large portfolio of investments in unlisted businesses that may not have passed governance minimum requirements and possibly might well have been politically motivated investments. There are also untested allegations of nepotism, corruption and incompetence. So the long-suffering CEO, Dan Majila, actually eventually resigned at the end of November because of all these allegations that have been floating around. And this preempted the commission of inquiry set up by the president, that's President Ramaphosa. The inquiry will look at the activities at the asset manager between 2015 and 2018. The first 2 days, that's today and tomorrow, are going to be looking at policy issues. The various directors in charge of different divisions within the PIC have given testimony and they claim not to have known of any impropriety in their divisions. So we'll have to see what happens tomorrow and in the coming weeks. This, of course, has to finish around the 15th of February, and the President then expects to report on what's happened in that PIC.
Well, we'll certainly continue to keep an eye on all of them. Many thanks, Angelo, for that update. Angelo Coppola joining us there in Johannesburg. Well, let's head to the north of Africa now. Egypt has signed a deal with Jordan to supply the kingdom with half of its needs of natural gas to generate electricity in the country. While Egypt's latest gas discoveries in the Mediterranean Sea has made the North African state self-sufficient in natural gas. With the details, here's CGTN's Yasser Hakim in Cairo.
The statements by both sides did not specify the exact amount of natural gas to be supplied to Jordan, but it could exceed a previous agreement signed in 2004, whereby Egypt had provided the kingdom with 250 million cubic feet per day of natural gas.
After the 2011 uprising, the surge of terrorism led to continuous attacks more than 12 times on the Egyptian pipelines that reached Israel and Jordan. The absence of security and failure to protect the damaged pipelines forced the government to take a decision to cancel all its contracts with Israel and Jordan in 2012.
This had led to an economic crisis in Jordan, as 80% of its electricity and fuel output depended on Egypt's natural gas. It resorted to the more expensive Israeli and European options. But after the political stability and latest Zohr gas discoveries in the Mediterranean Sea, Egypt has been able to resume exports to Jordan.
Israel reduced its supply to Jordan in order to meet its growing local needs, while the industrial growth in Jordan required even more gas consumption. Egypt, which now produces over 6 billion cubic feet of gas per day, has stepped in to revive its previous contracts. Egyptian companies like Petrojet are also establishing the infrastructure to install natural gas in Jordanian homes and replace fuel for energy and electricity.
So the gas deal comes at the right time for the kingdom. It provides badly needed and affordable source of energy that will benefit the people and the industries alike in Jordan. Yes, Hakim for CGTN, Cairo.
Meanwhile, British charity Oxfam is asking governments to hike tax rates for corporations and the super rich to tackle the growing global wealth gap. Recent data from the aid agency revealed that billionaire fortunes rose by $2.5 billion per day in 2018, recording an increase of about 12% for the year. Now, as the fortunes of the rich grew, the half of the world's poorest saw their wealth decline by about 11%. Now, this report, titled Public Good or Private Wealth, comes as delegates gather to discuss challenges of the global economic structure at the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland.
So last year alone, we saw billionaire wealth increase by $2.5 billion every day, while the wealth of the bottom half of humanity, $3.8 billion, was dropping by $500 million a day. This is a trend. It just doesn't happen just once. So we're seeing some progress, but not enough. So we're here in Davos, I'm here in Davos, to call on governments to wake up and take up their responsibility and tax fairly, tax wealth, and put money in the public services that people need.
Well, joining us to break down that report is Oxfam's East Africa Regional Director, Lydia Zigomo. You're very welcome to the studio.
Thank you very much.
Lydia, well, let's talk a little bit more about the numbers in this report. Now, a key finding in that report is that the number of billionaires have doubled since the financial crisis in 2008. Yet we've seen the super rich and corporations paying lower rates of taxes than they have in decades. Meanwhile, the bottom half of the world's population have seen their wealth dwindle. So give us a sense of the numbers that are backing this report.
So some of the numbers that are quite interesting is that using the Forbes billionaire list, for instance, for March 2018, there are 2,208 billionaires around the world. The majority of those are men. 9 out of every 10 of those billionaires are men. Most of them are concentrated in the developed world, so essentially US, China and Germany, who have respectively 34%, 12% and 6% of those billionaires. So that just shows you what is happening in terms of gender, but also in terms of where the wealth is concentrated, which parts of the world the wealth is concentrated.
And what are the numbers on the lower end in terms of the poorest? They're also losing quite a number of a lot of money on a daily basis.
Yes, I think for me the most striking statistics are around the fact that we have a global compact on the Sustainable Development Goals saying that by 2030, which is not very far away, we will have eliminated extreme poverty in this world, which means that there will be no longer anyone living on $1.90 per day. However, unless we address the inequality gap between the rich and the poor, we will still have in 2030 200 million people living on less than $1.90 per day. On top of that, we also have from the World Bank 3.5 billion of this world's population living on less than $5.50 per day. Now, the challenge with that is there are just one medical bill or a crop failure in one season. Those people will also slide into extreme poverty and find themselves on less than $1.90 per day. So the statistics are very worrying in terms of how vulnerable a huge percentage of the global population is in terms of poverty, but also particularly slipping into extreme poverty.
Now, of course, highlighting the human cost of this inequality we see globally, you talk about the fact that while huge rewards go to the top, hundreds of millions live in extreme poverty. So whose fault is it that this imbalance continues to persist?
I think what we are trying to show is that while the world economic system is not necessarily favorable to closing that gap, there are, however, things that can be done by national governments and governments as a collective to impact on that situation. It's not an inevitable, fatal situation that we need to just resign ourselves to. So our focus is particularly on the fact that fairer tax systems is one contribution to reversing this growing inequality. On top of that, we would also, of course, need other issues to be resolved, like rich countries honoring their commitments to aid that they promised poor countries, as well as tackling issues of, obviously, corruption. You've been talking about it in other parts of your program, etc. All those are necessary ingredients. But creating a fairer tax system, both nationally as well as globally, ensures that, ensuring that of the money raised, the revenue raised from that, it is actually targeting the public health services. All public services will make the difference, in our opinion.
Now, some people are criticizing the report. They say inequality is real, but taking away wealth from the super rich and giving it to the poor will not help, especially when you talk about tax rates. They say the focus should be on increasing competition in different markets, as well as reducing barriers to entry. What are your thoughts on that?
I think it's a view, but our view is that while you can open up markets and everything else, increase the role of private sector, that in itself will not make a huge difference for the poorest of the poor, who normally cannot afford privatized public services. So basically, we are saying governments have a core and crucial fundamental responsibility to ensure that everyone in their nations has access to the basic things that we have agreed are the human rights of every citizen, which is free and universal healthcare, education, and these impact most on women and girls, as well as ensuring that we then have the right investments in things like our infrastructure, transportation, all our telecommunications, which enables people to be actually able to make the connections with each other and live in a world that is better connected and functions better for the benefit of the majority, not just the minority.
Well, I certainly wish we can delve further into the report, but unfortunately we've run out of time. But thank you so much for joining us. Thank you so much for your insight. Of course, that was Lydia Zigomo. She's Oxfam's East Africa Regional Director. Now, of course, you're watching Global Business Africa. Let's take a short break now, but still to come on the show. We take a look at what to expect from this year's World Economic Forum in Davos. And China's GDP grows by 6.6% in 2018. More on that after this short break.
Business in Africa is at the crossroads. We celebrate those who are adopting and thriving despite the challenges, from grassroots to big businesses.
Global Business
takes you along for the ride as we track the making of a giant.
Only on CGTN.
How will your world change today? What happens here? What happens there? Or what you make happen for yourself. If it matters to you, it matters to us too. Your stories are the stories that need to be told. Africa Live. Find your voice.
There's more to this place than just glorious landscapes. There's more to it than just, say, Table Mountain or glorious, endless salt flats. There's more to it than countries that are home to some of the deepest mines in the world. There is so much more to this place, even if it is home to some of the finest diamonds on the planet. It is the sheer diversity of the people who call Southern Africa home, and the relentless drive to make it a better place that make it so special. And we know that because this too is home. No one knows Southern Africa like we do. CGTN, see the difference.
Now, around 3,000 participants from all over the world will converge at Davos, Switzerland. They're from every sphere of influence, including business, government, civil society, academia, arts and culture, as well as the media. Now, our reporter Yang Shengxi examines how the demographic of the participants has changed over the past few years.
The World Economic Forum is one of the foremost high-level gatherings of global elites. The biggest contingents come from Western Europe and North America, with the US having the biggest delegation every year. But participation from Asia has increased in recent years. Chinese President Xi Jinping opened the 2017 annual meeting, and the People's Republic of China has sent more and more representatives since. The forum also reflects the increasing gender equality in senior management across world sectors, as the percentage of female participants has risen steadily. Private sector participants in Davos represent more than 20 industries. In the past, media and information have taken the top spot. Yet since 2017, top honors have gone to the banking and finance industries. IT also has significant representation, propelled by technology and the concept of the Fourth Industrial Revolution, which remain consistent themes throughout the Davos annual meetings. The theme this year focuses on globalization. Heads of major international institutions like the United Nations, the WTO, and World Bank, and so on, have all gathered in this Swiss town.
Many experts believe that the rising public frustration over globalization and institutions have led to a surge in populism and nationalism worldwide. Talks on the future of globalization will be a major part of discussions here at Davos 2019. Yang Shengxi, CGTN, Davos, Switzerland.
Well, let's shift our focus to Brexit now. Prime Minister Theresa May has scrapped the £65 fee which millions of citizens were to pay to secure the right to continue living in the UK after Brexit. Now, she made the announcement during a statement to members of Parliament on how she plans to get them back a deal. She says she'll have further discussions with Northern Ireland's DUP and others on their concerns about the Irish backstop. She will then take the conclusions of these discussions back to the EU. Now, MPs are due to vote on any proposal next Tuesday, after Theresa May's original plan was defeated last Tuesday by a record-breaking 230 votes in the House of Commons.
First, there is widespread concern about the possibility of the UK leaving without a deal. And there are those on both sides of the House who want the government to rule this out. But we need to be honest with the British people about what that means. The right way to rule out no deal is for this House to approve a deal with the European Union. That is what this government is seeking to achieve. The only other guaranteed way to avoid a no-deal Brexit is to revoke Article 50, which would mean staying in the EU. There are others who think that what we need is more time. So they say we should extend Article 50 to give longer for Parliament to debate how we should leave and what a deal should look like. This is not ruling out no deal, but simply deferring the point of decision. Mr. Speaker, I believe this would go against the referendum result. And I do not believe that is a course of action that we should take or which this House should support.
Well, let's head over to China now. The country's GDP grew at 6.6% in 2018, hitting its annual growth target of around 6.5%. That's according to the latest data released by the National Bureau of Statistics. But what was the country's economy like in 2018 in terms of performance, and what are the challenges ahead? Well, CGTN's reporter Zhu Yun tells us more.
Slower growth rate, yet still at a reasonable and stable range. And this is also the first time for the total volume of China's economy to exceed 90 trillion yuan. In the last quarter of 2018, the country's economy slowed to 6.4% year-on-year, and this is actually the slowest growth in nearly 3 decades. However, Ning Jizhe, head of the National Bureau of Statistics, said at the press conference that although the world's second largest economy is facing increased downward pressure, the country's economy is sustaining a momentum of progress. And despite the ongoing trade tension with the United States, China's trade volumes remains on the upswing in 2018. Exports were up over 7% and imports rose nearly 13%.
Trade volume set a new record by topping 30 trillion yuan for the first time. The total imports and exports achieved the set goal of stable and positive development with increased volume and optimized structure.
Meanwhile, the country's high-tech manufacturing has witnessed fast growth.
High-tech manufacturing and equipment manufacturing investment have increased by 16.1% and 11.1% compared to last year.
Ning Jizhe also says despite the growth, there are concerns over the change amid the stable economic performance, with external environment getting complicated and downward pressure getting intensified. There are some assumptions that China's economy will get worse before it gets better. However, the head of National Bureau of Statistics said that in 2019, China will continue its efforts in advancing reforms as well as guarding against risks in order to realize a sustainable, resilient, and also inclusive growth. So Yun, CGTN, Beijing.
Now, CGTN has had the opportunity to sit down with Huawei's founder and CEO, Ren Zhengfei. Huawei, of course, is a leading global provider of information and communication technology infrastructure and smart devices. The company has become a regular in world headlines for 2 reasons: the detention in Canada of Huawei's CFO, Meng Wanzhou, who is also Ren's daughter, and the blocking of its leading 5G technology, especially in Western countries. Take a look.
On January the 17th, Ren Zhengfei sat down for his first TV interview with Chinese media. It was conducted at the Huawei headquarters in Shenzhen.
Hello, Mr. Ren Zhengfei. I am Dong Qian from China Central Television. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you for giving us this opportunity. But I've always been curious why you haven't appeared on TV in all these years. What reason did you have for that?
I haven't really thought about it, but it's not a problem not being on TV. I think the written word is more powerful.
Why is that?
I write the documents myself.
We've been on the Huawei campus for 2 days with a VIP media pass. Your colleague told me this has never happened before. Very few media have been allowed in here before.
We welcome the media. But we never say we want to invite more. That would be an exaggeration. We receive the media, but not lavishly.
According to public data, Ren Zhengfei gave no more than 10 media interviews in the 31 years from the founding of Huawei in 1987 until 2019. But in 3 days, from January the 15th to the 17th, he was interviewed by dozens of domestic and foreign media. Many have connected this burst of interviews with Huawei's recent situation, including the detention of his daughter, Meng Wanzhou, by Canadian police.
Everyone is very concerned about the detention of Meng Wanzhou. As a father, your concern is different from others. What do you want to do for your daughter, and what can you do?
First, I want to say thank you to the party and the state for protecting the rights of a citizen. What we can do is depend on the power of law.
Can you contact your daughter now?
We've talked on the phone and shared some jokes.
Are you worried about her?
Not too worried, but it will take a long time to sort this issue.
Ren Zhengfei says he and Meng Wanzhou had planned to attend a meeting in Argentina. As the chair of the meeting, Meng left 2 days earlier than he did. Unexpectedly, Meng was arrested on December the 1st as she transferred planes in Canada and then detained by local police. 10 days later, on December the 11th, the Canadian court approved her application for bail. That night, Meng posted on social media, "I am proud of Huawei and my motherland." The accompanying picture was a Huawei advertisement called Ballet Feet, which says, "Behind greatness is suffering."
How long has it been since you saw her?
I don't know. Quite a long time, I think, since last year.
Because of your work?
All of us have our own families, our own nuclear families. So even if we finished our work, we couldn't always sit around a big table and eat together.
This is true for everyone. Some people can't see their parents because of work, some because of their own families. But few people are in this kind of situation. Does it make you miss her even more?
She's better than my youngest daughter. The youngest one came back home from abroad and stayed for only one night and then flew away. The older daughter is better. She stays for a while.
Don't you feel a bit?
No. The most important thing for children is to grow up and be independent. That is what parents want. We don't expect to be taken care of. The more independent they are, the wider our gap gets. Then it is their turn to decide whether to communicate with us.
But in the end, this has happened to her.
The issue should be resolved by law, and I do believe it can be resolved.
On the detention of Meng Wanzhou, Huawei's first statement was that the company complied with all applicable laws and regulations in the countries where it operated, including those applicable to the United Nations, the United States, and the European Union. Currently, from Asia to Europe, from South America to North America, Huawei is operating in 170 countries worldwide. It signed 30 5G commercial contracts and delivered more than 25,000 5G base stations worldwide. Although Huawei has not been involved in any major security incident, some countries are still resisting Huawei's entry under the pretext of network security. And the Meng Wanzhou incident highlights this barrier from the commercial level to the political level.
A short time ago, you said in an interview that Huawei will not treat anyone as an enemy or a competitor. Its goal is to jointly promote the progress of an information society for humanity. But some people do regard Huawei as an opponent. So how will your company deal with this situation?
This is a competition, and you do well or you don't. If you do well, you will certainly have customers. You don't have to worry. I've never worried about this. Let me give you an example. 2 days ago, I told Western reporters that the best 5G technology in the world is made by Huawei. The best microwave in the world is made by Huawei. There are only a few companies in the world making 5G and only a few companies making microwave equipment. Only one company makes microwave and 5G well. When we combine 5G and microwave transmission, we don't need optical fiber. We use ultra-wideband, which is cheaper. And it has been put into use in less developed countries, some of which are in Africa. In Western countries, many live in individual houses. Installing fiber optic in every household is too expensive. But without it, they cannot watch 8K TV. Huawei provides small base stations that connect the neighborhood at an affordable price. We are the only company that can do that.
But what if there are some countries that use national bans to stop you from taking part?
If they don't buy it, it's their loss. It's like a competition, a peaceful one. Technological competition is a peaceful competition. If they don't buy our technology, what else can they do?
What do you think of this problem? When Huawei was growing up, when it was young, it did not have core technology and could not compete with others. Now it has core technology, but some countries won't let you compete. Is this a necessary process for every company?
There are a few countries like this, but the number is not big, so the influence is small.
As you have said, European and American countries account for 60% of investment in telecommunications. If important European and American countries keep you out, what can you do?
We won't worry about what someone did to us in past. We're market economy. We're customer-centered. When they want to buy, we will sell it to them. But I focus on the countries that want to buy our products.
Well, let's move on now. The Champs-Élysées in Paris is home to some of the world's most exclusive brands. Now, the Chinese electronics company Xiaomi has opened a new store on the famed shopping strip. And one of the firm's top bosses has told CGTN that Europe is a key area for growth. Well, Oliver Whitfield Chichi reports from the French capital.
The end of a long wait for hundreds of people for the opening of the new Xiaomi shop in Paris. Thousands of dollars worth of free goods enticed customers to wait outside in the cold for hours, with one man turning up a day in advance.
They care about their clients and develop relationships with them. Other brands don't do that.
Xiaomi is best known for its mobile phones, but it also produces electric scooters and homeware goods. It's been operating in Europe for just over a year, and the company's vice president says it has become popular quickly.
We are #4 smartphone brand in the world. In Europe, although not very long, but we are still a #4 smartphone brand.
Samsung and Apple dominate over 60% of the market in this part of the world. The Chinese brand is hoping to attract customers with products that are cheaper than its rivals.
Xiaomi already has a big market share across Asia, especially with its mobile phones. Now the company says the new focus market is here in Europe, and it's expecting to open lots of new stores across the continent.
That's in addition to the 4 countries Xiaomi has shops in already.
So far we are in Spain, France, Italy. We were in UK since last November. So we will continue to build more presence.
Hoping to leave its stamp with a mixture of technology and more traditional products. Oliver Whitfield CGTN, Paris.
And moving on now, here's a look at how commodities performed today. Oil prices sliding down in line with weaker stock markets. And that's after evidence that economic growth in China, which is the world's second largest crude consumer, eased in 2018. Meanwhile, gold prices holding steady, as well as the expectation that the US Fed will pause its multi-year interest rate hike cycle, was suddenly offset by a recovery in investor appetite for risk. Well, let's head into a short break now. Do stay with us. We'll be right back.
Images may appear to be identical, but looks can be deceiving. The difference is not always obvious. It has to be discovered. There are always different sides to a story. We put the focus on the details. To see more, to understand better. CGTN. See the difference.
Egypt now. The country has won the vote to host the Africa Cup of Nations in June 2019. Of course, it's expected to bring in thousands of fans from the 24 participating nations. Well, CGTN's Yasser Hakim looks at the financial and economic benefits expected for the hosting nation from receiving the tournament.
The organizing committee has pledged about $25 million for organizing the competition. This is a relatively small amount compared to previous cups.
We have infrastructure ready, such as roads, transportation and stadia. That usually costs a huge amount of money for the hosting nations. It's available here, so this will save us a lot in terms of time and in cost.
There are various sources of income expected from this competition, such as ticket sales, which will be divided between Egypt and the African Football Federation.
The last competition in 2017 has made a profit of $12 million. This we expect Egypt's share from revenue will exceed $20 million, especially after the number of participants has reached 24 teams. According to the deal, Egypt will receive 20% of the total profit of the tournament. The rest goes to the African Football Federation.
The African Cup is expected to attract thousands of fans from the 24 participating nations. This would push up revenue for the sectors that serve these visitors.
When you have all these fans coming at once, this will create an economic boom. Hotels, touristic sites, restaurants and shopping areas will benefit. Also remember, besides the African expats, there are 35,000 African students at Al-Azhar University in Egypt. There will definitely be a high demand for tickets for the games.
Media sponsors and advertisement revenue is also expected to cover a substantial amount of the expenses.
Sports marketing has developed so much in the last few years. CAF has its international sponsors who pay a lot for this tournament, in addition to the local sponsors who will be joining in. You also have the fan zone idea, which was very successful in the Russia World Cup. That's where fans go to watch games outside the stadium with a huge screen, video games, food, shopping outlets and sponsors all in one place. It's very profitable.
It is too early to determine the exact income from hosting this year's African Nations Cup. However, the organizers believe there will be huge financial rewards compared to previous tournaments. Yasser Hakim for CGTN, Cairo.
And before we go, a quick look at how Africa's currencies performed today. South Africa's rand mildly softer against major global currencies, suddenly digesting mixed news out of Asia, although the market focus did remain on Brexit. Now, some analysts are saying the rand looked somewhat overbought today after a strong showing against the dollar this month. Meanwhile, Kenya's shilling firming up against the dollar due to inflows from diaspora remittances as well as offshore investors buying government debt. Well, that's it for this edition of Global Business Africa. Remember, you can send your feedback to the contacts on your screen. You can also follow us on our various digital media platforms. From me, Uche, Okoronkwo, and of course the rest of the team, thanks for watching.